Our motto in that role is my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jackamek, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. My service never stops.
There's nothing quite like the feeling of going to the theater. Onstage celebrates that excitement every week by taking you behind the scenes with the latest news and in-depth interviews of the hottest shows on and off Broadway. So grab a seat, because this is a show you won't want to miss. Join us every Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m. for Onstage.
Onstage is presented by your Tri-State Cadillac dealers. Discover which Cadillac is right for you and elevate your journey.
News all day. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Shannon Ferry. It is just about past the hour, and here's a look at some of the developing stories we're tracking for you today. Civil rights leader Jesse Jackson has died. Jackson was a protege of Martin Luther King Jr., whose long career in politics had a major impact around the country and here in the city. Jesse Jackson was 84 years old. Mayor Mamdani is unveiling his preliminary budget proposal today. It comes after Governor Hochul and the state announced that they will provide $1.5 billion to help the city address its multi-billion-dollar budget deficit. And the Trump administration has released additional federal dollars for the Gateway Tunnel project, but the fate of the project still unclear. It comes after a judge ordered the White House to free up millions in funding that it had frozen for the rail tunnel. All right, let's get a quick check of the forecast. Mother Nature helping to get rid of some of the snow today. Temperatures above. Mayor Mamdani is presenting his preliminary budget now at City Hall. Let's bring you there live.
Condolences to his wife and to their children. Now, I want to turn to today's budget presentation. As I share our preliminary budget for the upcoming fiscal year, I want to be clear about the moment we are in and the two paths that lie before us. As the mayor of New York City, I have a legal obligation to balance the budget. I will meet that obligation. This administration will govern with the seriousness, responsibility, and accountability that has too long been absent from City Hall. When we took office, we inherited a historic budget gap. Our aggressive savings plan, daily incorporation of updated revenue and bonus estimates, and our deployment of in-year reserves, in tandem with more than $1 billion in additional aid from Governor Hochul, have lowered that deficit from an initial $12 billion to $5.4 billion. While considerably less, it is still a significant chasm. I know that for those who have watched budget after budget, it is tempting to assume that we are engaging in the same dance as our predecessors. Let me assure you, nothing about this is typical. That's why our solutions won't be either. There are two paths to bridge this gap. The first is the most sustainable and the fairest path. This is the path of ending the drain on our city and raising taxes on the richest New Yorkers and the most profitable corporations. The onus for resolving this crisis should not be placed on the backs of working and middle-class New Yorkers. If we do not fix this structural imbalance and do not heed the calls of New Yorkers to raise taxes on the wealthy, this crisis will not disappear. It will simply return, year after year, forcing harder and harsher choices each time. And if we do not go down the first path, the city will be forced down a second, more harmful path. Faced with no other choice, the city would have to exercise the only revenue lever fully within our own control. We would have to raise property taxes. We would also be forced to raid our reserves. To balance the budget as required by law, our preliminary budget takes the only path within our control, the second path. The options of the second path are the options of last resort, options that we will only employ if there is no other means of arriving at a balanced budget. We will spend the coming months doing everything in our power to ensure that our final budget reflects the first path. We remain firmly within a budget crisis. It is a crisis that we can and will overcome. But we cannot do so without either significant structural changes in Albany or painful decisions of last resort here at home. I am encouraged and heartened by the relationship that we have built with Governor Hochul and the state legislature, and hopeful that we can arrive at a fair solution at the end of this budget process. Now, let's walk through what we inherited, what we have done so far, and what lies ahead. We begin with the budget crisis we inherited. This crisis did not materialize overnight. It originated with Mayor Adams' 2025 November plan. The city's budget at the time was $118.2 billion. That plan projected a $4.7 billion gap in fiscal year 2027 and a $6.3 billion gap over fiscal years 2028 and 2029. We now know that those gaps were significantly understated. To understand the magnitude of what we inherited, the deficit left to us was larger than the gaps left by both Mayor Bloomberg and Mayor de Blasio to their successors. And that's even before accounting for enormous under-budgeted needs by the prior administration. Adams' November plan left the city with a $12 billion budget gap. When we took office, our team scrutinized every facet of city spending. What we found was in line with what former City Controller Lander found on December 16th, what State Controller DiNapoli found on December 22nd, and what City Controller Levine affirmed on January 16th. The $12 billion budget deficit confronting our city was historically vast. After incorporating $4 billion in revenue above what the November plan had assessed, and after taking standard budget actions, our administration found that our city's deficit was in line with the controller's projections. Today, as we lay out our preliminary budget, every decision we have made has been informed by this context and the challenges we inherited. This was a historic deficit, larger even than those faced during the Great Recession. Much of this gap came in the form of significant under-budgeting for major expenses. The prior administration ignored projections that estimated costs would rise. Across 6 foundational city services, like cash assistance, rental assistance, and shelter costs, more than $7.5 billion were left unaccounted for. The consequence was an enormous deficit within our budget. Beyond those 6 areas, there are additional major unfunded needs. The city must fulfill more than $6.6 billion in additional unfunded needs and state mandates, the most sizable of which are detailed on the screen. While we had no say over the budget crisis we inherited, we have taken a number of steps to address expenses and are monitoring our revenues daily to tackle the gap. In January, in this very room, I promised we would continue to incorporate up-to-date Wall Street revenues into our budget. That is exactly what we have done. Part of our ability to shrink the gap has come from incorporating higher than expected revenues from Wall Street. Wall Street profits are at a record high, surpassing any projections and allowing us to incorporate more revenue than anyone anticipated. Those record profits translate into increased tax revenue, $2.4 billion more than anticipated in fiscal year 2026 and $4.9 billion more than anticipated in fiscal year 2027. That's on top of revenue already added in the November plan. We are being as aggressive as we can in recognizing additional revenue and have surpassed the state in our estimates of personal income tax, corporate tax, and sales tax. But responsible governance is not only about revenue. It is also about discipline. That means finding savings across city government, reducing bureaucratic waste, and rendering agencies more efficient and cost-effective. That is why I signed an executive order establishing a chief savings officer in every city agency. Chief savings officers, or CSOs, have a simple remit: identifying savings within the agencies they serve. They will consolidate redundancies, insource programs that have been outsourced to bloated consultant contracts, and eliminate extraneous programs. Each CSO will issue a public report by March 20th, detailing the savings they have found and provide updated assessments every 6 months. These CSOs will have clear goals: 1.5% in savings in fiscal year 2026 and 2.5% in fiscal year 2027. Our work to find savings, however, is not limited to CSOs. We are pursuing a number of other avenues as well. We are significantly reducing current vacancies and removing hiring constraints to promote effective agency operations. We are hiring 50 new auditors at the Department of Finance, which we expect will generate $100 million in new revenue per year. We are also adding 200 lawyers to the law department to reduce tort liability, which we anticipate will yield $125 million in savings in fiscal year 2027 alone. We are not just looking for savings and efficiencies in the short term. We are also going after long-term causes of cost growth. Taken together, these aggressive savings measures, maximal use of in-year reserves, and daily recognition of updated revenues have allowed us to reduce the budget gap from $12 billion to $7 billion. I want to commend the members of my team who have exhausted every option to improve our fiscal outlook. I also want to thank Governor Hochul for her partnership. Yesterday, she announced that Albany would contribute $1.5 billion in state aid to help us bridge this gap. As the governor aptly said, a strong New York City means a stronger New York State. I am grateful to the governor for her support throughout the budget crisis. Here is what the state's $1.5 billion contribution includes. $150 million per year, reversing the distressed hospital sales tax intercept, $60 million per year, reversing of a public health cost shift, $300 million per year invested in youth programming, and $500 million in one-time unrestricted state aid. Much of this state assistance reverses long-standing Cuomo-era cost shifts. And we've also just received information that new data in the state's school aid formula will bring an additional $97 million to New York City on a recurring basis. All of that brings the fiscal deficit down to $5.4 billion. But I want to be clear, $5.4 billion is still a very steep mountain to climb. And there are two paths that we can walk. One that offers long-term stability, and a second one with significant pain that we deeply hope to avoid. The first path repairs the structural imbalance between the city and the state. We want to work with Albany to raise personal income taxes by 2% on the 33,000 New Yorkers earning more than $1 million a year, and to raise corporate taxes on the most profitable corporations. And we know that for far too long, New Yorkers have given far more to the state than what we have received in return. It is time to end the drain. If we cannot follow this first path, we will be forced onto a much more damaging path of last resort, one where we have to use the only tools at the city's disposal, raising property taxes and raiding our reserves. This second path is painful. We will continue to work with Albany to avoid it. This first path will deliver the structural change that we need to recalibrate the relationship between the city and the state. Because as we know, New Yorkers contribute 54.5% of state revenue, but receive only 40.5% back. At the same time, New York City's portion of the state's GDP has grown by nearly 10% since 2010. That imbalance is untenable. Once again, I am calling for Albany to end the drain. There is no third option of failing to balance the budget. By law, ever since the fiscal crisis of the 1970s, which placed the city on the brink of bankruptcy, New York City has been legally required to balance its budget. We will do so. If we cannot pursue the first path, the only option we have remaining is the second path. At the heart of this path is a property tax increase. This would effectively be a tax on working and middle-class New Yorkers who have a median income of $122,000. The second path also requires us to raid our reserves. It would mean withdrawing $980 million from our city's rainy day fund in fiscal year 2026 and $229 million from the Retiree Health Benefit Trust in fiscal year 2027. These are steps that have been taken before, but only in moments of extraordinary external crisis. Mayor Bloomberg's response to the 2008 financial collapse and Mayor de Blasio's response to the enormous revenue shortfall caused by the pandemic. We do not want to have to turn to such drastic measures to balance our budget. Now, let's talk about what this means for our future. Let me share the details of our preliminary budget for the upcoming fiscal year, the needs that we're meeting, and the investments we're making in New Yorkers. This is a budget that is balanced at $122 billion in fiscal year 2026 and $127 billion in fiscal year 2027. You can see here the breakdowns in spending by percentage of agency budgets. 40% of funding that goes to agencies is going to DOE, 26% is going to social services, 12% to our uniformed agencies, and the remaining 22% to the many other agencies that keep our city running. This reflects our priorities: education, healthcare, safety, and the everyday functioning of the city that we love. This preliminary budget increases city expenses by over $14 billion, expenses that we have to fund because the Adams administration failed to. This includes $7.5 billion for the 6 under-budgeted areas I mentioned earlier, including cash and rental assistance and shelter costs, and $5.85 billion to fund additional needs that were previously left unbudgeted. As you can see here, of our city dollars in this plan, only 4% represents new programmatic spending. Again, of $14 billion, only $576 million is going to deliver new programmatic spending. Some of that spending includes immediate protections for New Yorkers in this winter. $5 million helped us open warming centers and street outreach increases for homeless New Yorkers during the recent snowstorm. This also includes an addition of $100 million to our snow removal budget. Beyond winter response, we are expanding services to our most vulnerable neighbors. We are increasing clinical and behavioral health services to New Yorkers living with severe mental illness and deepening our efforts to connect homeless New Yorkers with shelter and healthcare. And as we look to protect New York's fiscal health, we will also protect New Yorkers' rights. We are bringing on 200 attorneys and 100 support staff within the law department. And we are more than tripling baseline funding for HRA's Community Food Connection Emergency Food Program, adding $54 million in fiscal year 2027 and onwards so that we meet the needs of New Yorkers in crisis. Let's close with the long-term investments that we are making in our capital plan to deliver a healthy, vibrant, safe city for New Yorkers. We are showing you here the city's $113 billion preliminary 5-year capital plan. Those investments span transportation, environmental protection, housing, schools, and other core priorities, the physical foundation of a thriving city. This capital plan also makes major investments in NYCHA developments, including $662 million in fiscal year 2027 to boost renovations, and over $38 million specifically to install heat pumps in more than 700 housing units in the Rockaways. We will also invest over $48 million in the expansion of the Adult Comprehensive Psychiatric Emergency Program at Bellevue Hospital. This is a critical need that will make an enormous difference in the lives of 2,500 additional New Yorkers each year. To conclude, here is our preliminary budget as it stands. It reflects the second path that the city is forced to go down, because today it is the only path fully within our control. But let me repeat what I have said many times this morning. This is the preliminary budget. We will do everything in our power to budget reflects the first path, a path that ends the drain and asks the wealthiest among us and the most profitable corporations to contribute that little bit more so that working New Yorkers do not bear the burden of this financial crisis. Now I will go through our financial plan. As you can see here at the top, this is the November 2025 financial plan released by the Adams administration that projected a balance of fiscal year 2026 and then the out-year gaps of more than $6 billion with a gap of $4.6 billion in the fiscal year 2027. Here we see tax revenues, $2.4 billion, $4.1 billion fiscal year 2027, and then we have the out years. We can see here of the state action, the fiscal impact of the decoupling from federal legislation will yield $723 million in additional revenue starting in the next fiscal year. Here is part of the $1.5 billion that I was referring to earlier from the state. This is the sales tax distressed hospital intercept. Here is the impact from state tax programs that we support, but also have a fiscal impact on the city, taking $3 million in revenue this year, $64 million the next year. This is the one-time unrestricted state aid that I was referring to earlier, $500 million. Here are the non-tax revenues. These are effectively fines, fees that are collected by the city, $56 million this year, $25 million the next year. This reflects the second path that we are forced to take within this preliminary budget, which showcases an increase in property taxes yielding $3.7 billion in the next fiscal year. All of that leaves us with the total revenue changes of more than $3 billion in fiscal year 26, more than $8.6 billion in fiscal year 2027. Then if we go into the expense changes, we see by finally acknowledging the under-budgeted agency needs, we see a $6.6 billion change in this fiscal year, $7.4 billion in fiscal year 2027. This is a cost that the city has paid in recent years, but not reflected on its budget. We are bringing that to be clear with New Yorkers as to the money that we are spending as the city, $911 million in fiscal year 26 for the Health Stabilization Fund, $1.144 billion in the next fiscal year. These are the savings that we anticipate from the NYC PPO health savings, $411 million this year, $791 million next year through the renegotiation of city healthcare plans. Then here is part of the 1.5 that I was referring to earlier. This is the reversal of Article 6, the provision of youth programming and school aid. $360 million in fiscal year 2026, increases to $457 in the next fiscal year because of the addition of the $97 million in additional school aid. These are the costs of pension. We have $16 million this year, savings of $99 next year. Then we have debt service savings of $40 million this year, spending of $40 million the next year. Then we have the general reserve, 1.150 in fiscal year 2026, 1.1 billion in fiscal year 2027, leaving the required amount within that reserve. This is the rating of the reserves that I was referring to earlier that we are forced to do in the second path. That's $229 million from the Retiree Health Benefits Trust Reserve. However, I will also show that in fiscal year 2028, we then return that funding back into both the Retiree Health Benefits Trust Reserve as well as the Rainy Day Fund, because we are seeking to put our city on firm financial footing. Rainy Day Fund, a withdrawal of $980 million in fiscal year 2026. Then we see the Capital Stabilization Fund, $250 million in both fiscal years. Labor reserve savings, $150 million here, $400 million in the next. These are the savings I was speaking about of 1.5% in this fiscal year, 2.5% in the next projected agency savings with the CSOs. This is an adjustment for OTPS inflation of $56 million in 2027 fiscal year. This is a re-estimate of prior year expenses and receivables. All of that leaves us with expense changes of nearing $3 billion in fiscal year 2026, more than $4 billion in 2027, and then we go into the out years. Then, as you can see, as a result of these approaches, it is a balanced budget in fiscal year 2026, a balanced budget in fiscal year 2027 as required by law, and then out year gaps here from 28 to 30. And I'll just go through the next slide as well. This is an overview of the amount of money that we are receiving in the subtotal of taxes. You can see existing property tax, other taxes, tax audit revenue, tax programs, and then the increase in property taxes if the city is forced to do so. You then see the subtotal of city funds, where in addition to those taxes, we are adding in miscellaneous revenues, unrestricted intergovernmental aid, things of that nature, brings us to $91 billion in fiscal year 26, $97.6 billion fiscal year 27, and then that brings us out with the addition of categorical grants to $122 billion for fiscal year 26, $127 billion in fiscal year 27. Then if we look at expenditures, we're seeing personal service. We're seeing that come out to about $61.4 billion in fiscal year 26, $62.9 fiscal year 27. And then other than personal service, we see the subtotal of about $59.2 billion this fiscal year, $56.5 in the next fiscal year. All of those things added together, with addition to the reserves as well, we find the total expenditures of $122.3 billion for this fiscal year, $127 billion for the next fiscal year. The gap to be closed in 26 is 0, in 27 is 0 as required by law, and then the gaps in the out years.
Now take your questions and have the first deputy mayor and budget director available for them as well. We'll start with Katie. Go ahead.
Hi, Mayor Mamdani and to Sharif and to Dean. Could you just explain, if the nuclear option is the one you have to go with, what would the property tax rate be increased to? And that would be for all the 4 classes of properties. And then secondly, on a broader level, you know, I know you ran on an affordability agenda, and this would likely, if this happens, if this goes down that path, not only would it go up for homeowners if you have a reform property tax system yet, but it would likely go up for renters because of the tax rate on multi-unit buildings. Do you want to first talk about the tax rate increase, and then also, you know, the betrayal that some of your supporters might feel by increasing things for them?
So I'll first speak about this broadly, and then I'll go. I want to be first very clear. This is a preliminary budget. This is a budget that reflects the only tools that the city has at its disposal. When we are speaking about property taxes, that is a tool of very last resort. We believe it should be viewed as such. not only because it is a broken property tax system, but also because this is a fiscal crisis that was not created by working and middle-class New Yorkers. It should not be placed on their backs in order for the city to resolve it. That is why we will continue to spend each and every day through this budget process, emphasizing the need to chart out the course of the first path. That path would mean increasing taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers, the most profitable corporations, and ending the drain that has long characterized the relationship between the city and the state. The property tax increase, if the city was forced to do so, would be at a 9.5% increase. This is something that we do not want to do, and this is something that we are going to utilize every single option to ensure does not come to pass.
So, Mayor, do you then blame Governor Kathy Hochul for refusing to do a tax hike, and both on the wealthy and on corporations? And just yesterday, she gave you $1.5 billion additional dollars, but is it not enough? Will New Yorkers suffer at the expense of a governor who doesn't want to also be criticized during an election year?
You know, I am encouraged by the partnership that we have been building with Governor Hochul, and I'm thankful for yesterday's announcement of 1.5, and now what we see translates into $1.6 billion in additional state aid. And I'm also very clear-eyed about the fact that we need to put the city back on firm financial footing. This is the beginning of both the city and the state budget process, and that the most sustainable and fairest means by which we can do so is by raising taxes on the wealthiest, the most profitable corporations, and ending the drain that has long characterized the relationship between the city and the state.
Should you blame her if she doesn't agree to that?
I think what we are seeing right now is what the fiscal deficit is that the city is facing, $5.4 billion. And we are now going to use every single tool at our disposal to ensure that this is a fiscal crisis not resolved on the backs of working and middle-class New Yorkers.
It looks like there's a second part to this path number one, not just obviously the property, or not just the income and corporate tax, but also ending the drain by fixing the imbalance. Is there a specific number that you're looking for in additional state funding that is part of that path number one? And is there, dare I say, a path number three that includes some of this, some of pulling down from reserves? Is it really just one or two in your eyes?
The city contributes 54.5% to the state's revenue, receives 40.5% in return. We are looking for a fair reflection of the city's role within our state. And I'm heartened by the actions that the governor has taken yesterday, the reversal of a number of Cuomo-era cost shifts that we saw the city be targeted time and time again on. There are sadly many more examples of those cost shifts. And the reason that we are emphasizing the need to increase revenue by taxing the richest New Yorkers, the most profitable corporations, the need to end the drain, is that we need structural solutions to a structural crisis. This is a crisis that if we do not resolve in a structural manner, we will only be postponing to have to return to it once again. I know that I do not want to be standing here in this blue room 1 year from now speaking to you about the very same nature of a crisis. It is a crisis that has long been brewing. This year is an opportunity for us to resolve it and put the city back on firm financial footing.
Is there a dollar figure, though, in that ask?
I can tell you the dollar figure that we are looking for is $5.4 billion to ensure that we do not have to go beyond the responsible use of in-year savings, the aggressive savings plan that we have also put forward, and have to broach into the path that we have laid out today.
Two quick ones. The February 25th, a bunch of groups are going up to Albany to follow through on your demand here to pass the tax to the rich. Times reported you aren't going. Has that changed? How are you going to kind of keep this push going? Second, what did you do to inform your coalition partners here that you were proposing this kind of nuclear option that is scary to a lot of working class New Yorkers about a property tax increase?
We have been clear from the very beginning of our time as an administration that the city is facing a significant fiscal crisis, the likes of which we have not seen in a long time. And it is a fiscal crisis that will require attention to structural fixes. So when we first came forward in this blue room, we spoke about the $12 billion that we saw as the fiscal deficit in line with controllers' assessments. That was a $12 billion deficit after the assumption of $4 billion in increased revenue on top of the November 2025 plan. In the time since then, we look to utilize every tool at our disposal to bring that number down. That is why we've put forward an aggressive savings plan. That's why we have CSOs. That's why we're looking at every potential efficiency, at every opportunity to eliminate waste. That was a key part of driving that $12 billion down to $7 billion. Now, thanks to the state's aid, we are looking at $5.4 billion. However, we are reaching this number having exhausted almost every option in front of us, which then requires us to chart out what the two courses of action are. The course that we believe is not only the fairest course, also the most sustainable course, is by ensuring that we end the drain and that we increase taxes on the richest New Yorkers as well as the most profitable corporations. That is something that I have long said. It is something that I will continue to say, because what we are seeing is the absence of that would force us to resolve a generational fiscal crisis on the backs of working and middle-class New Yorkers who did not create it.
Tell that to your council member allies and also February 25th.
We have shared this over the as to the scale of this crisis and today the actions that we're taking to resolve this crisis. And I can tell you that I've just returned back from Albany from a 5-hour budget hearing and also being at caucus weekend. We will continue to make plans as to how we engage with Albany. It's going to be a constant part of these next few months.
Morgan, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, Morgan.
Just wondering why, for a third option, why isn't savings a third option for the administration? Why isn't maybe getting relief from the class size mandates a third option that you guys are looking at? And then separately, what happens if the council doesn't go along with the property tax raise? Right now, the council speaker, Julie Menon, is saying that this is not something that should be on the table, an option. So wondering what happens if the council stands opposed to this agenda.
I agree that this is not something that should be on the table. However, the city has very limited tools by which it can reach the legal requirement of a balanced budget in both this fiscal year and the next fiscal year. We are looking at every which way we can to bridge a $5.4 billion fiscal deficit. And as part of our path of reducing the $12 billion to this point, we have a very aggressive savings plan, one that we anticipate, as we showcased, will yield around $1.7 billion over 2 fiscal years. And what we are doing in that savings plan is not just interrogating the efficiencies, the potential to eliminate waste, as well as pulling the city back from its instinct to engage in so many acts of outsourcing to consultants, but also to look at what are the medium-term actions we can take that could reduce the city's expenses. Part of this is tort reform. Part of this is also hiring more fiscal auditors. That work will continue. March 20th is when our CSOs will be presenting their plans to achieve those 1.5 and 2.5% savings. However, we are looking to exhaust every option in front of us. What we have to share with New Yorkers directly is that is how we got to $5.4 billion. If we find additional savings, we will absolutely use them. However, responsibly, I cannot tell New Yorkers that that is the likelihood over these next few months. Instead, what we have to do is ensure that we do not balance this budget on the backs of working and middle-class New Yorkers.
Mr. Mayor, this is an election year for Governor Hochul and the legislature. We already have a situation where the governor said, I'm not going to raise, I don't want to raise taxes on millionaires. And this morning she said she doesn't support property tax hikes. I wonder if we have a situation where this is a clash between ideology and reality, and if faced with the fact that you won't get those taxes from Albany, would you really, really, really raise property taxes here in New York City?
This is not a conversation on the basis of ideology. This is a conversation about a fiscal crisis. I have long believed in the importance of taxing the rich. I've said so publicly many a time. And I've long believed in the need for the state and the city's relationship to be a fair one. What we are speaking about in this moment, however, is not just that long-standing belief, the long-standing issues that have characterized that relationship, but a generational fiscal crisis of $5.4 billion. And when faced with this crisis, the question is, who should pay these taxes? I believe that it should be the wealthiest New Yorkers, the most profitable corporations. I believe that they can afford to pay a little bit more. We are in the most expensive city in the United States of America. I firmly believe in the need to make this an affordable city. I believe that we do so and reckon with structural crises by pursuing the first path, one of raising taxes on the richest New Yorkers, the most profitable corporations, and ending the drain.
Would you really, when push comes to shove, raise the property taxes?
I do not want to raise property taxes. I have said time and time again that it is a broken system, one that we are sincerely looking to reform, which is why we're going to be sending up a proposed piece of legislation in the next few weeks. What I am showcasing to New Yorkers is that there is one tax the city can raise. It is a broken property tax system. We do not want to do so, which is why we have said time and again that we want to work with Albany to ensure that we resolve this fiscal crisis by addressing the structural roots of it. Thank you, Marshall.
Is there, as you're considering structural problems, are the chief savings officers or city budget officials looking at any potential structural problems within some of the cost drivers that are driving up the spending? Like, I know there's been a bunch of criticism of the Carter cases, and who it goes to, and rental assistance payments going to landlords who have already been critical of. Are you looking to propose any changes in some of the legislation that is actually pushing the costs up?
We are taking a firm look at every single part of our city's budget. And that includes not only interrogating the immediate causes of this deficit, but also the medium and long-term structural issues that the city is facing. I'm going to pass it over to my budget director to add to that.
Sure, and the short answer is yes. I mean, you mentioned the due process cases. It really stems from federal law and also state regulation, but we're looking at that. We're also making investments in more special education programs for the Department of Education that would obviate the need to have the Carter in the first place. So we're looking at that. The mayor mentioned tort reform. We're looking at that to reduce the amount of judgments and claims. So the short answer is yes, we're exploring every opportunity.
All right, Nick, go ahead. That's Sally.
Hi. Could you explain how the property tax increase would dovetail with the property tax reform plan that you are saying you want to submit to Albany in the next few weeks? Would, if that were to pass, would that mitigate any of the what you said would be a severe impact on middle class and working class homeowners? And just quickly, I also wanted to ask about, you said the vacancy reductions you're pursuing in this plan. Is there any risk of that affecting services and exacerbating short staffing, which you've said is a huge issue?
So I'll start with the second question, then I'll go to the first. We are eliminating the 2-for-1 rule that agencies have been subject to for prior years. We are allocating funding such that agencies can hire 50% of the vacancies that have been longstanding in city government. And this is actually a part of our commitment to ensure that we're delivering the best possible city government to New Yorkers, because what these rules and the inability of these agencies to hire for these vacant positions have done is ground government to a halt. And we are looking to make the most efficient and excellent city government possible. And this will be a part and parcel of the approach that we're pursuing. Your other question? Yes. We are going to deliver a bill to Albany. It is not a hope. It is a commitment. We are going to do so in the next few weeks. This has been part of a long-standing belief, not only of mine, but of many New Yorkers, that the current property tax system is a broken system. That is a belief separate from the preliminary budget. We are not looking to raise property taxes. We are not looking to reform the system only to then use the system in this fiscal year. We believe the system has to be reformed, and we believe that the way to bridge this fiscal gap is by increasing taxes on the wealthiest and the most profitable, and by ending the drain. And I will also just add, before we go to the next question, that this is the preliminary budget. We will obviously have an executive budget, and then we will have an adopted budget. We are showcasing the tools at our disposal that we can use to reach the legal requirement of a balanced budget. Over the next few months, we will use every single day to ensure that we are building an adopted budget that reflects our desire for this to be a budget that not only reckons with the fiscal crisis that New Yorkers are facing, but also doesn't resolve it on the backs of working and middle-class New Yorkers.
Mayor, I had two questions also. One of the ways you're balancing the budget, as you've said, is to pretty significantly draw down these reserves. They're, generally intended for even more dire times than this one, perhaps, like a recession. I'm just wondering if this, I know this is just your first offer and there's a negotiation coming, but how committed are you to drawing down the reserves as substantially as you have in this? And my second question is, when do your labor negotiations start, and have you budgeted any kind of placeholder for that?
So I'll start with the first question. If we can actually bring the slide back to this, exactly, right here. So what the second path forces us to do is to utilize the rainy day fund and the retiree health benefits trust reserve. Now, as you can see in fiscal year 28, we do put investments back into those very reserves because we want the city to be on firm financial footing. However, there is a reason that we did not include these in our city's attempts to get to 5.4 billion, because these are the rating of reserves that we do not want to pursue. These are the kinds of reserves that what we would rather do is ensure that they remain as they are so that the city can be on firm financial footing. However, in order to get to this point of closing the gap on both this fiscal year and the next fiscal year, we are forced to raid the rainy day fund, the retiree health benefits trust reserve, and to increase property taxes across these other years. Do you want to? Oh, on the labor.
Sure. Labor negotiations are ongoing. They never really end. There are a few contracts that were never settled in the last administration, like EMTs. Most of the labor contracts, though, don't start to sunset until the summer. There is a labor...
One moment, Melissa. We'll just finish that.
1.25% is in the labor reserve.
If you were to have your property tax reform passed through Albany, would ultimately we end up with a system that does what you're hoping for the state to do, which is for the wealthier property owners to be paying more? And would that, in your view, potentially mitigate the problem of it falling on working class people? And then, in addition to that, how can you say that raising property taxes is necessary if your chief officers, your savings officers have not yet completed the process of looking through these various agencies?
So in this same budget, and we can go back to this budget, so what you will find is the agency savings. 710 million in this fiscal year, 1.06 billion in the next fiscal year. The reason that I point to these is that while the CSOs have not yet returned with their analysis and assessments of their individual agencies, these are the savings goals that we are putting to them. 1.5% in this year, 2.5% in next year. And so these are the most aggressive savings that we can pursue without inhibiting the functioning of city government. We have seen in prior years what is required of city government when you are putting together 3%, 5%, things of that nature. What we are talking about is eliminating inefficiencies and waste and ensuring that we're still a fully functioning city government. And then to your earlier question on real property tax, before I pass it over to our budget director, we need to reform the real property tax system. And that has been something that's been understood in our city for years prior to this budget crisis. It's a system that is unfair. It's a system that is inequitable. It's a system that can barely stand up in court. And so the reforms that we are going to put forward, the piece of legislation, it builds on the work that has been done over many years. I don't know, Sharif, if you can add to this.
So to add to what the mayor said, the property tax reform legislation will be modeled on the recommendations of the New York City Advisory Commission on Property Tax Reform, which really advances structural changes to the property tax system that makes it inequitable in the first place. One of the things that we would be looking at is the elimination of the assessed value caps that create sort of the inequities in the first place by having effective tax rates for homeowners and Staten Island homeowners in Southwest Brooklyn, homeowners in Canarsie and Southeast Queens, higher than you would find in many cases in other parts of the city, for example. To your question about co-ops and condos, one of the reforms is to use sales-based models to be able to value the property so that effective tax rates can be more in line with condos, for example, that are in the many tens of millions. So it creates the structural reform to create more equity throughout the system based on property value.
Thank you. Henry, go ahead and we'll go to Josie.
Mayor. First on police and then on big picture. I see in the budget you brought the police number down to roughly 35,000. You promised this during the campaign, saw it in the budget. I'm wondering what the overtime number is next year and in the out years. And then zooming out, big picture here. I think you ran a campaign that you could best describe as sort of like joy for working class people, for affordability. There's not a lot of joy in this room right now. We're not talking about free buses. We're talking about dipping into the rainy day fund. We're not talking about taxing millionaires. We're talking about taxing working class people.
Well, I am talking about taxing millionaires, but yes.
But not in.
No, I think to your question, what we are speaking about today, what we are presenting on, is what we have inherited. We have to engage with honesty, transparency, and directness with New Yorkers as to the fiscal health of the city that we have inherited over these last few months and then the years prior. And our agenda is not simply one to protect the city services that we already provide. It's to advance an agenda that makes it easier for working class people to live in this city. Because as we all know, this is both the wealthiest city in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and it's a city where 1 in 4 New Yorkers are living in poverty. And so what we are looking to do is put our city back on a firm financial footing that also allows us to tackle the affordability crisis. And we know that part of this crisis has been fomented by the inability of government to meet the moment. We've spoken about this briefly with regards to the vacancies that have been kept year over year. We want to deliver the most excellent city government so that we can transform the most expensive city in the United States of America into one that every New Yorker can afford. And that is precisely why I have been emphasizing the need for structural solutions to a structural crisis. Because what we do not want to do is engage in an annual budget dance where the city is trapped in annual deficits that it needs every single year one-time assistance with. What we need to do is reckon with the structural nature of this and put ourselves back on the kind of footing that allows us to advance an agenda.
Police questions. I mean, the projected
Yes.
overtime, which you promised to slash.
So what we have shown in this budget is an actual accounting of the cost that the city is paying for. Typically what we've seen is a lot of these costs are obscured in the budget only to then be paid out later. So we have put that forward in this budget, and we are also working towards the reduction of it, as we have seen already through the police commissioner's actions.
What is I didn't see a number. I mean, perhaps this is for the technical briefing. I don't mean to.
We will cover it in the technical briefing.
We'll cover it in the technical briefing.
Thank you.
We've got time for a few more here. Just a reminder that the budget director will be available later. Liz, go ahead, and then Chris.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. During the campaign, you argued that raising taxes on the rich would help you fund an agenda like free buses, like city-owned grocery stores that would make the city more affordable. But now it seems as if you're proposing to ask the governor to raise taxes on the rich to help address this budget gap. At what point does those, ongoing revenue stream will allow you to then, fund things like the buses and other things that you have proposed? That's my first question. And my second question is, you're keeping NYPD money relatively flat, but you've been critical of the way the NYPD spends money. Why not extract savings from the NYPD? And where is your Department of Community Safety in this budget?
So we investments in the Department of Community Safety within our executive budget. And what we have put forward in terms, if we can go back to the other, the financial plan. These projected agency savings, they are across every agency. We are looking at an entirety of city government approach to achieve the 1.5 and 2.5%. And the reason for that is that this is a crisis that the entirety of city government is facing. And I've also said, as was previously covered, the importance of us continuing to not only address the long-term the long-term imbalance that has characterized the relationship between the city and the state, also to raise taxes on the richest New Yorkers and the most profitable corporations. These are structural solutions that will provide us with the foundation so that we can advance not only a solution to the fiscal crisis, but also an affordability agenda. Now, in the campaign, I spoke about the importance of raising about $9 billion in additional taxes. I laid out the mechanisms by which we would do so. that continues to be the case. I continue to believe in the importance of that. What I am addressing today is the immediate crisis at hand, of which we are outlining is a $5.4 billion fiscal deficit that is critical for the city to be able to address by the time that it adopts its final budget.
Get you any new initiatives that are not in this current budget plan?
Taxing the rich will put the city back on its firm financial footing, and taxing the rich at the scale that we proposed not only does that, but also advances the affordability agenda. Now, one thing I will also add is that within our budget also is a reflection of the state's more than $1 billion commitment to fulfill our campaign promise of delivering universal childcare to New Yorkers. What we are seeing is not only money that's earmarked to fix 3K, meeting the demand of New Yorkers across the city, but also for the first time in city history to deliver childcare for 2-year-olds, which will begin with 2,000 seats this year, 12,000 seats next year. By the end of year 4, a seat for every single 2-year-old.
All right, got time for just 2 more. So Josie, go ahead, and then Chris will be last question.
Hey, Mayor, how are you?
Hi, Josie. How's it
I'm
going?
going to follow up on Melissa's question, I believe, about the CSOs. Sounds like you're putting a ceiling on you're not capping it at the...
We are saying this is the goal that we have, and if a CSO comes back and they find more savings or more efficiencies, then we will absolutely... The functioning of city government has been hamstrung by the prior administration's approach, whether it be through vacancies, whether it be for a 2-for-1 rule, whether it be by the grounding to a halt of many city services. We believe that 2.5% is the highest level of savings that we can anticipate agency-wide without starting to inhibit city services.
Are you ready for blowback from Black homeowners who would largely be most impacted by a property tax hike? This is a constituency that you've struggled with, especially obviously on the campaign trail. And today's announcement is likely to irk them, let alone if property taxes actually, or higher property taxes actually come to be.
What we are announcing is a path of last resort, one that we do not want to pursue. And I join in anyone across the city who is concerned by the prospect of raising property taxes, because I do not believe that it is either the most sustainable or the fairest way to resolve this fiscal deficit. And I will be spending each and every day of this budget process looking to ensure that our final budget reflects the first path that we have put forward today.
Thanks. Last question before we go to technical briefing in a bit. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on Liz's question as mayor. You're saying just to put the city on firm financial footing. So I just want to make sure I understand it clearly, because I feel like you didn't answer Liz's question. Are you saying that this year's budget, the FY27 budget, will not really be able to make good on your affordability agenda? Is this just a plan to stabilize the picture, and then the promises will be acted on later on?
We showed on day 8 of our administration our ability to deliver on the largest promise within our campaign, which was to deliver universal childcare to New Yorkers. That is a commitment in tandem with the governor to not only fix childcare for 3-year-olds, 3K, with more than $100 million earmarked for that, but also to deliver for the first time in city history, childcare for 2-year-olds for free from city government. 2,000 seats this year, 12,000 seats by the end of next year, until we get to every single 2-year-old by the end of year 4. We also continue our focus on making buses not only fast, but free, taking every action we have at the city level to speed up the nation's slowest buses, and continuing to advocate and work on making those same buses free. This budget that we have put forward, it is a budget that both looks to reckon with the kind of a fiscal crisis that we have not seen in this city in years, and is also a budget that does not lose sight of the fact that this city as it is today is one that is far too expensive for working class New Yorkers, and utilizing every tool that we have to advance an agenda to make it easier for them to keep calling the city their home.
Just to follow up on police department too. It's in there that you're actually increasing spending for the police department by $600 million. The largest driver of that is something called personal service adjustment. What is that exactly? Is that overtime spending?
Generally, yes, that's what it is. And we can cover the other investments like fleet, for example, core operational functions as well.
And I think
Keep going up if you were.
this is a reflection of what overtime actually is. What we've seen under prior administrations is an inability to account for the actual costs of city services, whether they be overtime, whether they be cash assistance, whether they be rental assistance. I mean, we've gone through slides where just across 6 specific areas, we're looking at more than $7 billion, and then across others, close to another $7 billion. And as was stated earlier, we have made clear that this is a budget that will look for savings in every single agency across our city government, because it is a crisis that faces every single agency in our city government. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Next year with another budget cut of 6.6.
In about 15 minutes, we'll do the technical briefing with our budget director. For folks who want to...
So you have been listening to Mayor Mamdani as he unveils his first preliminary budget. We have been listening during this speech, which lasted just under an hour, I would say. Errol Lewis joining me on the set to break it all down. Errol, of course, getting the most questions from reporters there about this property tax nuclear option, as he is calling it. I know you talked to the mayor even before this speech a lot about property taxes and property tax reform. Is he actually going to do this? Is this political strategy?
He can try. He can't do any of these things alone, and that's partly why he makes a public presentation of what are going to be some very unappetizing choices that the city council, the state legislature, and the governor are all going to have to wrestle with. The city council in particular, though, has already signaled that they're not interested in touching property taxes. And the mayor, very interestingly, referred repeatedly to what he said was a broken property tax system. The last 6 mayors have promised to reform what is universally understood to be a broken and unfair system. On the other hand, he said that as far as what he can propose, there's certain things that he can have other partners in government try and do for him, money from the federal government, money from the state government. But he said, as far as what the New York City government can do for itself, taxing its citizens by changing the property taxes is one of the options that has to be considered. He said it's his second best choice. His preferred choice, of course, is to tax New Yorkers who make $1 million or more per year.
And speaking of that pushback that you mentioned from the council, because we heard from the city council speaker, I'll read some of that quote. At a time when New Yorkers are already grappling with an affordability crisis, dipping into rainy day reserves and proposing significant property tax increases should not be on the table. He said 9.5% is his proposed increase. Again, how does he manage his message of affordability? I don't want to add any more expenses to working class New Yorkers, and say that this is the second best option at the same time. Seems like a delicate balance.
Yes, it is. It is a delicate balance. And look, it could in fact be, or we should recognize that it is, the start of a negotiation, right? He's going to go to the city council. He's going to hand over this document. They're going to come back. They're going to have hearings. They're going to wrestle with it. They're going to argue about it. Every property owner in the city is going to complain, and the council members will let those complaints be known. And then we'll be right back where we started, which is, are we as a city going to tax the highest income New Yorkers? And it is something that, in fact, was talked about every single day on the campaign trail. It's something that the voters arguably voted for. And it will be up to the mayor to decide or to see if he can actually get that done.
Governor Hochul has continued to say, as we report here, that she will not add a tax for wealthy New Yorkers. She, of course, is up for re-election. He spoke very highly of her, that money that the state pitched in to help the city. How do the two of them kind of, handle their relationship now during this negotiation season? Because while he continues to push for this nuclear option, what he's not saying is that, well, it's if I don't get what I want with taxes. So
That's right. That's right. Well, I mean, look, there's a bit of a threat there. I mean, that is part of a negotiation. And look, it's realistic. It's not like he's making this up. He's saying, if you don't give me the money that I need by this method, I only have a couple of other choices. And frankly, there's sort of 2.5 choices. There's the tax on the wealthy. There's this property tax idea that may or may not survive. And then there's getting savings out of government. And anything that you don't do by the first 2 methods, you'll have to get by the third. That already sounds kind of scary. He's saying that he wants to get $700 million worth of savings out of city agencies this year, 2.5%, meaning $1.6 billion next year. And it will be agency by agency. They'll have to decide where do we cut. Because at the same time, Shannon, interestingly enough, he's budgeting for these agencies to staff up. Sometimes you can actually save money by adding more workers. The Department of Finance is the best example. If you go around and you actually collect fees and fines and other revenue that's supposed to come to the city, new hiring actually brings in a net increase in revenue. So we're going to have to all look at this agency by agency and try and figure out where and how the savings are going to come.
Yeah, he said he's going to be hiring some auditors and lawyers, so much more to come. It is time for a quick break here on News All Day. More on the budget coming up in just a bit. We'll be right back.
And that's a look at some of what's in the papers this morning. You done with the sports section?
Today's story is about the latest chapter for a beloved local business.
It's a beautiful day with temperatures in the 60s, but showers are expected in the next hour.
In a city that's always on the go, it's important to stop to hear the stories that connect us.
The news that matters to New Yorkers. That's what brings us together. That's Mornings on One.
Weekdays starting at 6.
It's only a slice. It's only made possible by Spectrum, connecting businesses of all sizes, like small businesses, instantly serving up orders and inventory on the Spectrum Fiber broadband network, and factories, seamlessly connecting to farmers in the field with tailored solutions that always deliver. It's only a slice. It's only everything. Get your business free fiber-powered internet forever. Call to find out how.
I'm Chris Jakovic. I served in the United States Air Force and I deployed 3 times. So in 2017, I was serving as an Air Force First Sergeant. Our motto in that role is my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jakovic, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. My service never stops.
There's nothing quite like the feeling of going to the theater. Onstage celebrates that excitement every week by taking you behind the scenes with the latest news and in-depth interviews of the hottest shows on and off Broadway. So grab a seat, because this is a show you won't want to miss. Join us every Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m. for Onstage.
Onstage is presented by your Tri-State Cadillac dealers. Discover which Cadillac is right for you and elevate your journey. Friday nights, The Big Deal with Errol Lewis, where Spectrum News' local political journalists break down the most important issues shaping our nation.
My time at New York One has shown me that in the city that never sleeps, the news never stops. So as the day winds down, turn to the rush hour.
Good afternoon, I'm Monica Burke.
To catch up on the stories that matter across the 5 boroughs, with in-depth interviews from the city's newsmakers, plus the latest forecast. Catching you up with today, preparing you for tomorrow. Right here on The Rush Hour. Weekdays from 4 to 7 p.m.
New York City weather can be beautiful, inconvenient, and at times powerful. And it affects everything we do. At New York One, our weather experts update you with the information and context you need throughout the 5 boroughs so you can better plan your day. And we do it every 10 minutes. We're the calm in the storm. Weather on the Ones on New York One. Get your weather anytime on the Spectrum News app.
Welcome back to News All Day. Thanks so much for staying with us. I'm Shannon Ferry. It is just about 1/2 the hour, and here's a look at some of the developing stories we're tracking for you today. Mayor Mamdani unveils his first preliminary budget. The mayor says state lawmakers can either raise taxes on corporations and wealthy New Yorkers, or he says he'll be forced to pursue a hike on property taxes in the city. He called the latter option a last resort. A civil rights leader, Jesse Jackson, has died. Jackson was a protege of Martin Luther King Jr., whose long career in politics had a major impact around the country and here in the city. Jesse Jackson was 84 years old. And the Trump administration has released additional federal dollars for the Gateway Tunnel project. It comes after a judge ordered the White House to free up hundreds of millions in funding that it had frozen for the rail tunnel. All right, let's get a quick check of the forecast. Mother Nature helping to get rid of some of the snow today. Temperatures above normal, topping out in the upper 40s. We struggle to see much sunshine, but at least the remainder of today is dry. Tomorrow, expect some late morning rain. We have early afternoon clouds. Rain returns for the evening commute, and the threat of rain continues through the end of the week. We continue to follow local reaction to Jesse Jackson's death. The Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network held an event today in Midtown. Sharpton and Jackson worked closely together for decades. Political reporter Dan Rivley was there. He joins me now with more. Dan, what did Sharpton have to say about this?
Shannon, Jackson's death was a profound loss for the Reverend Al Sharpton. Jackson was Sharpton's mentor, bringing him into the civil rights movement when Sharpton was just a young teenager becoming interested in the church. And the relationship continued for decades. Sharpton talking about how much it meant to him that he was able to spend the last 2 Christmases with Jackson and his family, even though the Reverend was in declining health. And Jackson was based in Chicago, but he had a national profile and a profound impact on New York City politics during Jackson's 2 presidential runs. The creation of his Rainbow Coalition, the cross-racial economic populist movement in those presidential elections really set the stage for David Dinkins to become the first black mayor of New York City in 1989. All those Jackson supporters who registered to vote, got interested in politics, were able to translate that into New York politics and electing Dinkins as mayor. So Sharpton called Jackson the bridge between the civil rights generation of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Sharpton's own generation and those generations to come in the civil rights movement.
He literally changed American politics, New York politics, and kept the civil rights movement going. And he was the bridge that would say, but let us get something done. And he would be there.
And this weekend, Sharpton said there will be a rally in remembrance and in honor of Jackson. And he said he doesn't think Jackson would have wanted an overly sanctimonious mourning, but rather the mourning that turns into action for the civil rights movement, Shannon.
Dan Rivley reporting for us today. Dan, thank you. The Trump administration has released more funding for the project to build a new tunnel under the Hudson River. That's in addition to the roughly $30 million the administration released for the project last week. A judge ordered the federal government to release funding that had been withheld since last year while the case plays out in court. In a post on social media, President Trump predicted the project would run billions of dollars over budget, saying it would be a disaster for the region. Governor Hochul responded to those claims.
I said to the president, I saw on Truth Social, you are criticizing this project for being over budget and not on time, except it is. This is the largest infrastructure project in America today. It is essential for the safety of 200,000 daily commuters. It's 10,000 jobs over the life of this.
And joining me now to discuss this back and forth in the project itself is Tom Wright. He is the president and CEO of the Regional Plan Association, which advocates for the Gateway Project. Thank you so much for joining us here on News All Day, Tom. Great to see you. I just want your initial reaction to all of this back and forth. As you said before we got on the air here, you are still forming your thoughts on this latest development because there have been quite a few.
Yeah, it's been following all the back and forth has been pretty intense for all of us the last 2 or 3 weeks. But Gateway is an absolutely necessary project, and we all know that it needs to get built. Before this delay and pausing and the demobilization of the workforce, the project was on budget and on schedule. But none of these pauses and delays were budgeted as part of the process. So this is going to add some cost to the project already, and we just hope that we won't have more of these delays in the future.
Should commuters feel confident that this tunnel will actually be built?
Yes, eventually the tunnel absolutely has to be built. The biggest danger, I think, to commuters is that there will be more major disruptions in the existing tunnels, which, after all, they flooded during Superstorm Sandy. They're over 110 years old. Amtrak is doing everything it can to maintain and repair them as they go along. But what they said over 10 years ago was, eventually we need to shut those tunnels down for months, if not years, to do the major repairs that are necessary. So the danger here is not that Gateway won't be built. Eventually it'll have to be built. I just hope it gets built before we have a major disruption on the Northeast corridor.
What's your response to those who argue that there are more pressing infrastructure concerns facing the region, facing the country right now that need to be addressed first?
I can't imagine what those concerns could possibly be. This is the linchpin to the entire Northeast region's economy. Over 20% of the GDP travels through this corridor, and this connects everywhere from Washington to Boston. We did an economic analysis a couple of years ago, estimating what the impact, the economic and traffic impacts would be if Amtrak needed to take one of the tunnels out of service for an extended period of time. What happens is you get a 75% reduction in capacity because trains have to go in both directions. And you could literally measure the economic impact in Virginia and in Maine from a closure of these tunnels.
We're going to have to leave it there. Tom Wright, President and CEO of the Regional Plan Association, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Time for another check of the forecast with Sally Ann. And Sally Ann, foggy out there today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was looking at the cameras. I could see Times Square, and you could see from different angles. I'm not sure what that is, but it is certainly foggy in some spots. The good news is the fog will clear as we go through the afternoon, and by the time we are done with our day, you'll be seeing some sunshine. However, it is going to be on the limited side of things. Now, what about these temperatures? They've been pretty mild. We are expecting them to go up into the upper 40s before the day is done. You can see on the radar screen, we're looking for any rain showers. They're not with us today. Tomorrow, they will be on and off through the day. So as we look at the evening, we do see some clearing conditions, and it's going to be a mild night. We'll stay above the freezing mark. Here's Futurecast, because I want to show you what happens as we go through our Wednesday. We start off late morning with a few light showers around the area. You can see this is 9 a.m. You'll need the umbrella, but then much of the day, it's just very cloudy. And then we go into the evening commute and a few more showers, especially the further north you are, the further south, it looks like just cloudy conditions to deal with. And eastern areas of Long Island will have some rain, but the city itself, it looks like it'll be very limited with the amount of rain showers that we end up with. But it's rain showers, not snow showers. That could change as we monitor what happens during the week. If you're traveling, Chicago's dealing with some snow and temperatures that are going to be in the mid-50s today. It's back down to the warm weather in the south. In Florida, they're looking at 80s. Here's a look at that 7-day forecast. Again, today we're in the upper 40s, mid-40s tomorrow. Bring the umbrella with you. And then on Friday, we'll see what happens with the system. Could bring us a little bit of a mix, but nothing real significant. No need for shovels. And we're back to the mid-40s by Saturday.
Thanks,
Shannon?
Sally Ann. Still winter here in the city, but baseball just around the corner. After the break, sports anchor Steph Manicero joins us from Mets spring training. We'll be right back.
From my time growing up in Queens watching New York 1 to my time reporting here, I've seen how quickly a story can change. At News All Day, we bring you the news as it's happening, from around the boroughs to local government to your neighborhood. Because our city never stops moving.
Hi, I'm Shannon Ferry with the day's developing stories. But first,
stay up to date and informed with News All Day, weekdays from noon to 4.
I moved from Dallas to Los Angeles all by myself. The order of things I wanted to set up was internet, water, then power. I needed to take a shower, but I really did need the internet for work and to watch my shows. That's kind of a crazy thing to admit in front of a camera. Pretend I didn't say that. I got to Spectrum. I was so relieved that I was getting the best bang for my buck. It was a huge weight taken off of my shoulders.
Real customers, real savings. To see how much you can save, visit spectrum.com/save.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. A lethal dose is in here. Who gets it, I won't know.
It's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable.
The sad reality is fentanyl is being mixed into everything now.
More kitchen now. My time at New York 1 has shown me that in the city that never sleeps, the news never stops. So as the day winds down, turn to the rush hour.
Good afternoon, I'm Monica Bergman.
To catch up on the stories that matter across the 5 boroughs, with in-depth interviews from the city's newsmakers, plus the latest forecast.
catching you up with today, preparing you for tomorrow. Right here on The Rush Hour. Weekdays from 4 to 7 p.m.
Welcome back to News All Day. Warming up today, and we are tracking some rain chances this week. Spring is just around the corner, and that means it is almost time for baseball season. And New York's teams have migrated to Florida as spring training is underway. We start our spring training coverage with the Mets. They come into the season with high expectations after an underwhelming 2025. They are training down in Port St. Lucie. And that is where we find our sports anchor, Steph Medicero, reporting from Mets training camp. Steph, a lot of new faces down there in Port St. Lucie. How's it going?
It's going good. Day 2 of the full squad workouts underway. Few things make me happier than the sound of the cracks of the bat, so love to see it. You know, Mets owner Steve Cohen was down here for the first time yesterday, and he said there's just a different energy here than there was last year, and that is because this is a completely different team than it was last year, right? They broke it down, they tore it down, they built it back up. No Pete Alonso, no Edwin Diaz. Say goodbye to the polar bear and the trumpets in Queens. No Brandon Nimmo, no Jeff McNeil. So there are a ton of new faces, but Steve Cohen said it, right? Goodbyes are hard. Hellos are fun, though, and so we are saying a whole lot of hellos this week to a whole lot of new faces, as you said, and that really starts in the infield, where 75% of this infield is new. Jorge Polanco at first, Marcus Semien at second, both veterans. Polanco brings a whole lot of power to the plate. 26 home runs last year. Meanwhile, Semien brings with him a Gold Glove that he won with the Rangers last year. At shortstop, no introduction there. That is Francisco Lindor. He didn't go anywhere, dealing with that hamate injury. Not expected to miss much, if any, time. And then Bo Bichette transitioning to third base. He is a great hitter, a two-time All-Star, a part of the Blue Jays team that made it to the World Series last year, brings with him that postseason experience. And I spoke with Semien and Bichette earlier this morning about how they're settling in, how these first few weeks with their new clubhouse has been.
Obviously, I've learned a lot on the ball field, and so at the end of the day, it's the same game. But it does feels like, in a lot of ways, my first season coming here and meeting new people and just kind of new surroundings and, you know, finding my way in a clubhouse and all of that. So it's very exciting, but also new.
It's always been a city that I've loved to visit, and now for it to be my home for 81 games is extremely exciting.
New outfielder as well, Luis Robert Jr., a 5-tool player coming over from the White Sox. Then a couple of new arms. Freddie Peralta from the Brewers could be this team's ace. And the two guys on the left there, Yankee fans know them well. Devin Williams will likely be the closer replacing Diaz, and then Luke Weaver, both of them making the switch from the Bronx over to Queens.
Expedites it a little bit. Having Clay Holmes as an ex-teammate, Juan Soto, those guys, you get a little familiar quicker, ask questions that are, you know, maybe not so much afraid to ask. But yeah, it's nice to have someone down in the pen there. It's like going to a new school. You're trying to make friends, and you're trying not to force anything. So you want to be at other people's speeds, but sometimes I got to hold back.
I gotta say, I'm so excited Luke Weaver didn't leave New York, because he is so fun to cover, and Mets fans will soon learn he is so fun to watch as well. He has a heck of a vocabulary. But Shannon, you know the phrase, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Something here was broke. Jury's still out on what exactly that was, but they went ahead and they fixed it. And spring training is the time where we really start to see this new team mesh, all of it start to come together. There's a lot of new pieces, a lot of new faces, and it all starts now.
And we're looking forward to see it all unfold. Steph, thank you so much. A local business got a big boost from last week's Super Bowl, and we caught up with Tonita after her big cameo with Bad Bunny. That story coming up after the break.
At Spectrum Noticias, we recognize that our New York City community is vibrant and diverse.
Spectrum Noticias delivers balanced coverage of the stories that matter in our communities and across the country.
Our journalists are based in the neighborhoods we cover, ensuring you get in-depth reporting on what's happening in the places we call home.
So join us at Spectrum Noticias. We're always on, always there for you.
Now available on your TV. Check your local listings. Also available on the Spectrum News app.
There's an international travel plan with Spectrum that was an additional $10 a month as opposed to paying a ridiculous amount per day for roaming fees. This literally felt like my old phone carrier was reaching their hand into my wallet and just helping themselves to some of my cash. I like having no surprises when it comes to my cell phone bill. And with Spectrum, that's been the case. So it saved me a ton of money.
Real customers, real savings. To see how much you can save, visit spectrum.com/save.
After 30 years of forecasting for New York, I've learned it takes a dedicated team to cover all the weather our city has to offer. As chief meteorologist at New York One, I'm honored to be able to help New Yorkers plan their day.
Morning, noon, or night, our team is here to bring you accurate forecasts you can count on, from severe weather updates to our Weather on the Ones. Watch the New York One weather experts with your Weather on the Ones on your TV and on the go with the Spectrum News app.
To News All Day as we take a look here at our picture of the day. Thank you for sending us this photo. As always, if you have a picture you want to share, post it on social media, use the hashtag NY1Pic, and you just might see it here on News All Day. And if you're getting a photo out there today, you just might take a photo of this fog, Sally Ann. But it will clear. We'll get some sun eventually.
Yes, and hopefully when the fog clears, you'll be able to see how much snow is left over, because those snow piles, they're slowly but surely going away for now. But we do have colder air next week, but let's talk about this week, because today, well, above average. It's been a while since that. We're looking at temperatures that stay above the freezing mark tonight. That's a good thing as well. Now, by the time we get into tomorrow, we will be a little bit cooler, but it is wet weather that helps get rid of the snow piles, because we'll have wet weather both Wednesday and Thursday, and then an end to our above normal happens by Friday. But hopefully we'll stay at normal. We're going to have to keep our eye on a system that could bring us some colder weather for Friday, but again, we're going to keep our eye on it. In the meantime, as we go through the afternoon, we'll see an increase in the sun, although today features limited sun, as I've mentioned. Futurecast will show you as this warm front pulls through, it kicks off a shower or two, especially as we go late morning on Wednesday, and then again later in the evening rush. But much of the day just features a lot of cloud cover again. Here are the rain chances, as you can see how they vary as we go through the day tomorrow. And we'll be watching again for that evening commute to see a few more rain showers than what we get in the middle of the day. So here's what we're expecting for tonight. Still on the cloudy side of things, temperatures above the freezing mark. And then tomorrow, we're looking at 45. By Thursday, it's down to 40. You get the trend. By the time we get to Saturday, we go back up to 45. Then next week, it's colder again. So enjoy today.
Okay, Sally Ann, thank you.
You're welcome, Shannon.
It's been over a week since the Super Bowl, but the big game continues to have an impact here in the city. This after the owner of the Caribbean Social Club in Williamsburg was featured in the performance. Maria Antonio Kay, also known as Tonita, made a cameo. Here she is hanging out with Bad Bunny and Ricky Martin. And Rebecca Greenberg recently caught up with her and discussed the importance of her appearance to Latinos in the city.
A toast to an iconic Brooklyn social club in the middle of Bad Bunny's Super Bowl halftime show.
As the album says, un shot de cañita en casa de Tonita. So I gave him a shot of rum.
If you blinked, you may have missed this cameo by Maria Antonio Kay, better known as Tonita, who hands Bad Bunny a shot while performing his song Nueva Yol, a love letter to the city's rich Latin history. On the field, Tonita stands inside a replica of her Caribbean social club in Williamsburg.
I went to the Super Bowl because he invited me to watch it, saying he would be there and wanted to share a little bit with me too.
Tonita opened the Caribbean Social Club more than 50 years ago, and it's served as a home base for the Latino community ever since. Many Puerto Rican New Yorkers say they felt immense pride while watching Bad Bunny's halftime performance.
Bad Bunny did such a good job. We love the representation. And we decided to come say hi to Miss Tonita and pay our respects.
It was an incredible experience. I cried at halftime because, honestly, that kid is so humble. Representing Puerto Rico gives me goosebumps. It's truly otherworldly.
Tonita says Bad Bunny first came to the social club years ago and a friendship was born. He even held a listening party there in 2022 for his album Un Verano Sin Ti.
One day he came here and we started a friendship. And he kept coming here many times, and that's how we continued our friendship.
Tonita's is one of the last Puerto Rican social clubs in the city. According to CUNY's Center for Latin American, Caribbean, and Latino Studies, the Puerto Rican population in the city peaked in 1970 at close to 900,000. Now 585,000 Puerto Ricans still live in the 5 boroughs. The club faces intense pressure to close, but Tonita refuses, even rejecting multi-million-dollar offers to buy the space.
This space makes people feel at home. When people arrive, they feel happy. It doesn't matter if they don't know you. They make friends and feel very welcome.
At 85 years old, Tonita says she has no plans to go anywhere, and she will keep serving $3 beers and cañitas to her loyal customers.
These doors are open to the public, and everyone who comes here is welcome. It's very important to share with our community.
In June, the community will hold its annual Tonita Fest, a block party that will celebrate the 52nd anniversary of the social club and the woman at the heart of it. In Williamsburg, Rebecca Greenberg, New York One.
All right, that does it for us here on News All Day. I'm Shannon Ferry. Stay with us. More New York One coming up in just a couple minutes at the top of the hour.
My father was a New York City firefighter. My mission, like his, is to serve New Yorkers in a city that doesn't stop when the sun goes down. Being with New York One since the beginning, I'm now honored to join you even earlier each weeknight. Starting at 8 with New York Tonight, we'll explore the latest news developments, followed by New York One at 10 to wrap up your day. So join me each weeknight starting at 8 right here on New York One.
You might think Spectrum is just for your home, but Spectrum is seamless connectivity everywhere. It's the network making the other networks sweat. Connectivity from an actual internet company, because internet is what you actually use your phone for. It's way more than 5G. With Spectrum One, it's 5G and fiber-powered internet, seamlessly combined for the fastest wireless speeds. Don't believe us? Ask this guy. He's one of millions who already know. Oh yeah, and this guy too. Turns out people like their mobile from a seamless connectivity company. That's why Spectrum is the country's fastest growing mobile provider. Spectrum One. It's only the seamless connection you love at home, everywhere you go. It's only everything.
We have so many ways to stay connected. A single touch can bring us closer to the families we love, the friends we know, and the city we share. And Spectrum helps us keep connected throughout the day, every day. Including more ways to watch New York One as a Spectrum Internet customer. Watch Spectrum News New York One on the Spectrum News app, available on all your favorite devices.
New York City weather can be beautiful, inconvenient, and at times powerful. And it affects everything we do. At New York One, our weather experts update you with the information and context you need throughout the 5 boroughs so you can better plan your day. And we do it every 10 minutes. We're the calm in the storm. Weather on the Ones on New York One. Get your weather anytime on the Spectrum News app.
My time at New York One has shown me that the news never stops. So as the day winds down, turn to the rush hour.
Good afternoon, I'm Monica Bergman.
To catch up on the stories that matter across the 5 boroughs, with in-depth interviews from the city's newsmakers, plus the latest forecast. Catching you up with today, preparing you for tomorrow. Right here on the Rush Hour. Weekdays from 4 to 7 p.m.
It's 3 o'clock. 1-800-GOT-JUNK for home or office. We make junk disappear.
I'm Shannon Ferry with the latest in a New York 1 Minute. Mayor Mamdani unveils his first preliminary budget. The mayor says state lawmakers can either raise taxes on corporations and wealthy New Yorkers, or he says he'll be forced to pursue a hike on property taxes. He called the latter option a last resort. Civil rights leader Jesse Jackson has died. Jackson was a protege of Martin Luther King Jr., whose long career in politics had a major impact around the country and here in the city. Jesse Jackson was 84 years old. The Trump administration has released additional federal dollars for the Gateway Tunnel project. It comes after a judge ordered the White House to free up hundreds of millions in funding that it had frozen for the rail tunnel. And the Year of the Horse is here. Asian communities across the city celebrating the Lunar New Year. The Year of the Horse represents enthusiasm, energy, and strength. On this Tuesday, February the 17th. Welcome back to News All Day, everybody. I'm Shannon Ferry. Thank you for being with us. More on those stories in just a few minutes, but first things first, a check of the forecast. So, Sally-Ann, yesterday people were still seeing some fresh snow on the ground, actually, and now the question is are we going to do that again? Are we finally warming up here? Are we done with the snow?
A long way to say, I hope you enjoyed your holiday weekend. And if you're waking up in a fog, it has nothing to do with the weekend because we all woke up with a bit of fog, at least this morning. That's the warmer air moving in. So that's the good news. Today is a warmer day than what we had over the weekend. In fact, already we've seen 5 degrees more than where we were yesterday at this time for Central Park. And it was even a larger gap earlier this morning. But we're looking at a day where we're going to continue to melt that snow. So as you mosey out the door, still want the winter coat and the boots, but you might not need the hat and gloves. And the umbrella, well, that's for tomorrow and the next day. In the meantime, though, we go into the afternoon and we'll see some limited sunshine as temperatures go into the upper 40s. And then we'll look at temperatures above the freezing mark tonight. I'll have more on that, well, roller coaster ride, as I'll call it, and the inclusion of a little snow later on in just a bit.
Okay, Sally-Ann, thank you. Jesse Jackson, one of the most influential civil rights leaders, has died. He was known for his decades in public service. He was a close friend of Martin Luther King Jr., and he turned that experience into a long career in politics, one that had a major impact around the country and, of course, right here in New York. Jackson died this morning, surrounded by his family, his wife, Jacqueline, 6 children, and multiple grandchildren. They called him a servant leader not only to our family, but to the oppressed, the voiceless, and the overlooked around the world. Bobby Kuza has a look back at Jackson's life and legacy.
Jesse Jackson's voice was unmistakable.
Young America, dream!
Over more than 5 decades in public life, he used his oratory to rally support to the cause of social justice and to his own political campaigns. That included 2 runs for president that fell short but inspired millions.
Live beyond the pain of reality with the dream of a bright tomorrow. Use hope and imagination.
Born in South Carolina, Jackson immediately thrust himself into the civil rights movement after college and was seen as a natural successor to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whom he worked alongside. Jackson was in Memphis near King when he was killed and took part in the funeral procession. In the early 70s, he founded his own organization called Operation Push and became a leading voice on issues of race and poverty, later forming a separate group called the Rainbow Coalition. When he ran for president in the 1984 Democratic primary, he faced long odds, but managed a surprising third-place finish behind Walter Mondale and Gary Hart. That positioned him as a leading candidate when he kicked off his 1988 campaign.
If I win, it means hope is electable. It means justice is electable.
Jackson won 11 primary contests, but ultimately lost out to Michael Dukakis. He delivered a rousing speech at the Democratic convention.
We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive.
Jackson traveled the globe meeting with foreign leaders, negotiating the release of prisoners in Cuba, Yugoslavia, and elsewhere. And he remained for decades a fixture in the civil rights movement, fighting for progressive causes.
Too few have too much subsidized by the government. Too many have little neglected by the government. And so priorities have to change.
History will remember Jackson both for his body of work as an advocate and as a groundbreaking politician who paved the way for others.
Keep hope! Keep hope! Alive! Alive! Keep hope! Keep hope! Alive! Alive! We'll fight! We'll fight for justice! For justice!
Bobby Kuza, New York 1.
Bobby, thank you. And Errol Lewis joining me now to talk more about his life, his legacy. Errol, your reflections watching that piece.
It's hard to sort of say goodbye. This is somebody I've talked to over the last 40 years. I've maybe interviewed him, I don't know, maybe a dozen times. I've had him on the podcast. We've had him on the show multiple times. Interviewed him even when I was a very young reporter at a community newspaper. Always very generous with his time. And over the years, I've managed to talk to a number of Dr. King's top aides. He was the youngest of the assistants to Martin Luther King Jr. He was only 24 years old when he was on the staff of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and they put him in charge of all of their operations in Chicago. I mean, just extraordinary. But he was a very good preacher. He was a very good tactician. He was a very good politician and a great orator. He was the package, you know, and in a different era, he would have been considered presidential timber for sure. His candidacies in '84 and in '88 were largely symbolic. But again, the tactician side of him came to the fore, and he really leveraged changes that leads in a straight line to the election of, say, Barack Obama. Yeah. The way it used to be done, it was a bunch of guys in a back room who would pick who the delegates would be. It was winner take all through every primary and caucus. And he changed all of that.
And on that same note, I would imagine that that had an influence on New York politics for someone like David Dinkins to become our city's first black mayor. Talk about his influence.
Oh, yeah. Listen, in
1988,
that 1988 campaign leveraged a lot of things. One of the things that it was absolutely clear, it was known, it was talked about, it was part of the central strategy that it would be a 2-year campaign. In 1988, everyone that wanted to support Jesse Jackson would register a lot of voters, would whip up a lot of excitement, would teach people how to go out and campaign, and then they would just roll that same effort over into the next year in 1989 to try and get David Dinkins elected as mayor. And that is exactly what happened.
You know, any other, in our last couple moments here, Errol, his legacy here in the city, his legacy here across the country, we're at such a critical time and divided time in our organization.
It's going to be a while before the historians get to this and really unearth the full meaning of it. But I will tell you, just a couple of weeks ago, I was doing an interview with Gregory Meeks, the congressman from Queens, and I asked him just in passing, hey, how'd you get into politics? Oh, he says, I was the Queens coordinator for the Jackson campaign in 1984. And so I went from being an attorney, a civic-minded attorney, to really getting involved in politics at that point. Everybody's got a story like that.
Well, Errol, thank you so much. As I've been telling you, Mayor Mamdani unveiled his preliminary budget proposal. The mayor says the city's budget deficit is about $5 billion. He again reiterated his call on state lawmakers to raise taxes on the city's wealthiest residents and corporations. And he says if that does not happen, then he will try to raise property taxes.
And if we do not go down the first path, the city will be forced down a second, more harmful path. Faced with no other choice, the city would have to exercise the only revenue lever fully within our own control. We would have to raise property taxes. We would also be forced to raid our reserves. The options of the second path are the options of last resort.
And joining me now to discuss this is Courtney Gross. Courtney, you know, we don't know if this is political bargaining, but a lot of the reporters were asking him, you know, what if this feels like a betrayal to the many people who supported you because you said you wanted to make the city more affordable, and a 9.5% property tax, it's not nothing.
Yeah, 9.5% property taxes is huge. We haven't seen property taxes be increased, and since the Bloomberg administration, he was facing a fiscal cliff when he first took office and had to increase property taxes several times over his tenure there. Ended up reversing it a bit as well. But this is quite stunning, because here you had someone who campaigned on the promise of affordability, reducing costs for so many New Yorkers, and property taxes are seen as a regressive tax. They are spread out across the board. 9.5% affects a homeowner, a small homeowner in Queens, potentially a lot more than it would in a large luxury penthouse in Manhattan for someone who is far wealthier. So we'll have to see how this goes. It's stunning. I was sitting there watching the press conference, and my mouth was open because it just felt like it was something that the city really hasn't considered in quite some time. And coming from Mayor Mamdani, who obviously campaigned on a very specific platform, it just felt very antagonistic to that platform.
Yeah, and you have to imagine that it would trickle down eventually to the renter as well, because building owners are then just going to pass that on to the consumer. We do want to point out, you need the city council in order to do this, and Council Speaker Julie Bennett said, I'll read some of the quote, at a time when New Yorkers are already grappling with an affordability crisis, dipping into rainy day reserves and proposing significant property tax increases should not be on the table. So what kind of potential fight does this set up the council and the mayor for?
Yeah, I mean, for many officials, it is a non-starter. I think we caught up with the Queensborough president, Donovan Richards, also at City Hall, and he said, you know, you're going to get people in his neighborhood, and in his borough in particular, homeowners in his neighborhood are going to lose their homes if you increase taxes like this on the backs of homeowners across New York City. This is a bluff. Mayor Mamdani obviously really wants this tax increase from Albany, the increase on millionaires and the increase on the corporate tax rate, which has to go through the state legislature and has to be approved by the governor. The governor has said no. She is up for re-election. So now he's laying his cards on the table, saying, well, if you don't want to increase taxes on millionaires, then perhaps we're going to increase taxes on property taxes on all New Yorkers. And it doesn't matter that it's Mayor Mamdani and City Hall who would be making this decision. New Yorkers are all going to the ballot box this year to vote for governor. If you increase property taxes on homeowners in Queens and Brooklyn, small property owners, they're probably going to take that anger out on someone, and it's probably going to be the incumbent. And Governor Kathy Hochul knows that. So some might say that what Mamdani is doing is brilliant politically, but I do think that it also has the opportunity to backfire, because it could potentially really sour the relationship that has been good up until this point with the governor.
No, absolutely. And I mean, he talked about how grateful he was for the governor in this budget proposal, talking about the $1.5 billion that the state kicked in to help with the deficit. But at the same token, what he's not saying is that he's really threatening to go with what he's calling this nuclear option if she does not act. It really falls on her.
He's really trying to paint this very horrible fiscal future and portrait for New York City. If you do notice, though, that he's not doubling down on spending cuts at all. He's proposed very small spending decreases for these chief savings officers that he's tasked in every city agency to come up with about a 2.5% decrease in spending or savings over the next fiscal year or so, which is, when you compare to other so-called fiscal crises that we've experienced over the last 2 decades, those spending cuts have been way bigger. We're talking about 5%, 7% that many previous mayors has been tasked with agencies to cut. So he's not going that route. He's just simply saying to Hochul, if you don't want to raise that tax, then I'm going to raise this tax. And you're going to hear critics say, well, why aren't you just examining the city budget? I mean, this budget is about $4 billion, almost $5 billion more than the current budget. So clearly they're spending more. Yeah. He has big priorities he wants to spend on. So he may have to, well, we'll see what happens politically. Is he going to have to go back and actually look through and try to have, instead of a 2.5% cut, will it be a 5% cut instead?
Well, we will have more coming up, Courtney. Thank you on Inside City Hall tonight. Particularly a good night to watch if you're interested in this, because tonight's guests are Mayor Mamdani's first deputy mayor and his director of management and budget. Time for another check of the forecast. Clouds still dominate today, but it should clear a bit before sunset. We have limited sunshine, bringing high temperatures into the upper 40s. That means the snow should melt a bit more. Tonight, we stay above freezing, more clouds rolling in, wet weather taking over tomorrow. Temperatures still make it into the mid-40s, but just slightly above normal. Keep the umbrella handy both Thursday and Friday. Dry and milder weather is expected on Saturday. The Gateway Tunnel project funding battle continues. After the break, the president of the Regional Plan Association joining us to discuss the back and forth over the money and the project itself. We'll be right back.
After 30 years of forecasting for New York, I've learned it takes a dedicated team to cover all the weather our city has to offer. As chief meteorologist at New York One, I'm honored to be able to help New Yorkers plan their day.
Morning, noon, or night, our team is here to bring you accurate forecasts you can count on. From severe weather updates to our Weather on the Ones. Watch the New York One weather experts with your Weather on the Ones on your TV and on the go with the Spectrum News app.
When you're connected with Spectrum, you get 5G and fiber-powered internet combined for the fastest wireless speeds. So you can sweat for the right reasons. It's only the seamless connection you love at home, everywhere you go. It's only everything.
I'm Sandra, this is Jorge, and we were adopted in 2019. I remember when they first came to us, Michael was already a teenager. The whole cliche of they're so lucky to have you guys, and it's the other way around. They have changed our family for the better. They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
My father was a New York City firefighter. My mission, like his, is to serve New Yorkers in a city that doesn't stop when the sun goes down. Being with New York One since the beginning, I'm now honored to join you even earlier each weeknight. Starting at 8 with New York Tonight, we'll explore the latest news developments, followed by New York One at 10 to wrap up your day. So join me each weeknight starting at 8 right here on New York One.
Welcome back to News All Day. Warmer temperatures today in the city as we track this fog. The Trump administration has released more funding for the project to build a new tunnel under the Hudson River. That's in addition to the roughly $30 million the administration released for the project last week. A judge ordered the federal government to release funding that had been withheld since last year while the case plays out in court. In a post on social media, President Trump predicted the project would run billions of dollars over budget, saying it would be a disaster for the region. Governor Hochul responded to those claims.
I said to the president, I saw on Truth Social, you are criticizing this project for being over budget and not on time, except it is. This is the largest infrastructure project in America today. It is essential for the safety of 200,000 daily commuters. It's 10,000 jobs over the life of this.
And joining me now to discuss this back and forth and the project itself is Tom Wright. He is the president and CEO of the Regional Plan Association, which advocates for the Gateway Project. Thank you so much for joining us here on News All Day, Tom. Great to see you. I just want your initial reaction to all of this back and forth. As you said before we got on the air here, you are still forming your thoughts on this latest development because there have been quite a few.
Yeah, it's been following all the back and forth has been pretty intense for all of us the last 2 or 3 weeks. But Gateway is an absolutely necessary project, and we all know that it needs to get built. Before this delay and pausing and the demobilization of the workforce, the project was on budget and on schedule. But none of these pauses and delays were budgeted as part of the process. So this is going to add some costs to the project already, and we just hope that we won't have more of these delays in the future.
Should commuters feel confident that this tunnel will actually be built?
Yes, eventually the tunnel absolutely has to be built. The biggest danger, I think, to commuters is that there will be more major disruptions in the existing tunnels, which, after all, they flooded during Superstorm Sandy. They're over 110 years old. Amtrak is doing everything it can to maintain and repair them as they go along. But what they said over 10 years ago was, eventually we need to shut those tunnels down for months, if not years, to do the major repairs that are necessary. So the danger here is not that Gateway won't be built. Eventually it'll have to be built. I just hope it gets built before we have a major disruption on the Northeast corridor.
What's your response to those who argue that there are more pressing infrastructure concerns facing the region, facing the country right now that need to be addressed first?
I can't imagine what those concerns could possibly be. This is the linchpin to the entire Northeast region's economy. Over 20% of the GDP travels through this corridor, and this connects everywhere from Washington to Boston. We did an economic analysis a couple of years ago, estimating what the impact, the economic and traffic impacts would be if Amtrak needed to take one of the tunnels out of service for an extended period of time. What happens is you get a 75% reduction in capacity because trains have to go in both directions. And you could literally measure the economic impact in Virginia and in Maine from a closure of these tunnels.
We're going to have to leave it there. Tom Wright, President and CEO of the Regional Plan Association, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Warming up today, even with that fog, Sally Ann is back with another check of your forecast after the break. Hey, Sally Ann.
Hey there, Shannon. Clouds are certainly in control, but as you mentioned, warmer weather. How long will it last, and do we need the umbrellas or the shovels? I'll have the answer when News All Day returns.
We have so many ways to stay connected. A single touch can bring us closer to the families we love, the friends we know, and the city we share. And Spectrum helps us keep connected throughout the day, every day. Including more ways to watch New York One as a Spectrum Internet customer. Watch Spectrum News New York One on the Spectrum News app, available on all your favorite devices.
It's only a hike. It's only made possible by Spectrum Business connecting healthcare providers of all sizes. Like hospitals relying on the Spectrum Fiber broadband network with industry-leading reliability. Practices keeping patient data safe with advanced security. Pharmacies accessing records in the cloud without fail. It's tailored connectivity solutions built for life-changing moments. It's only a hike. It's only everything. Spectrum Business.
Mom was always organized, but she started forgetting to pay her bills on time.
And she'd buy the same gifts over and over. Telling the girls about my Alzheimer's diagnosis was really hard.
At first, we had our cries, but then we were like, okay, let's make a plan.
Early detection gave us time to adapt together. It's so important for you to think about what you can do and making the most of what you have.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
Every day tells a new story. At Mornings on One, we're dedicated to bringing you the stories that matter most to start your day. With in-depth coverage of the day's news.
I'm Pat Kernan. Here are the stories we're following.
And weather updates every 10 minutes.
Tomorrow, some morning sunshine possible. Clouds take over.
It's our responsibility to get you the information you need before you head out the door. Mornings on One. Weekdays starting at 6 on the Spectrum News app. Free for Spectrum and Xfinity customers.
Welcome back to News All Day. As we take a look outside here, Sally Ann is tracking the forecast for us, and the forecast includes more melting of the snow that Sally Ann has just been here for such a long time now. We can't get rid of it, but more melting on the way.
That is true for today. But we've had a roller coaster ride, as I mentioned, with the temperatures. I mean, on the 14th, on Saturday, Valentine's Day, we made it to 46 degrees. But we've seen things go down, and even yesterday, it was only 39 as a high, below the average high. Well, today, we're back out into the upper 40s. So on this roller coaster ride, we go up. But by the end of the week, it'll go down again. So clouds giving way to some sun today. However, we've been seeing a lot of cloud cover throughout the morning and into the afternoon. It's very limited sun. Grab the umbrella, because by the time we get to tomorrow and Thursday, you're going to need it from time to time. And temperatures will start to cool a bit. But by Friday, still looking at temperatures only going into the low 40s. So we may actually end up being slightly below the average. But the good news is we rebound again on Saturday. So let's show you what's happening on Futurecast, because you can see all the cloud cover as we go through even this afternoon. And then I'm going to show you what happens on Wednesday. Late in the morning, we see a few rain showers pulling through. And then you could see as we go into the evening rush, another possibility of more rain. But we're going to keep our eye on that system that brings us the rain. Doesn't look like a whole lot, but that could help get rid of some of the snow, as temperatures tomorrow will be in the low 40s. As you can see, some snow showers expected in Boston today. I'll have a look at our 7-day forecast coming up in just a bit.
Thanks, Sally Ann. We continue to follow local reaction to Jesse Jackson's death. The Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network held an event today in Midtown. Sharpton and Jackson worked closely together for decades. Political reporter Dan Rivley was there. He joins me now with more. Dan, what does Sharpton have to say about this?
Shannon, Jackson's death was a profound loss for the Reverend Al Sharpton. Jackson was Sharpton's mentor, bringing him into the civil rights movement when Sharpton was just a young teenager becoming interested in the church. And the relationship continued for decades. Sharpton talking about how much it meant to him that he was able to spend the last 2 Christmases with Jackson and his family, even though the Reverend was in declining health. And Jackson was based in Chicago, but he had a national profile and a profound impact on New York City politics during Jackson's 2 presidential runs, the creation of his Rainbow Coalition, the cross-racial economic populist movement in those presidential elections really set the stage for David Dinkins to become the first black mayor of New York City in 1989. All those Jackson supporters who registered to vote, got interested in politics, were able to translate that into New York politics and electing Dinkins as mayor. So Sharpton called Jackson the bridge between the civil rights generation of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Sharpton's own generation and those generations to come in the civil rights movement.
He literally changed American politics, New York politics, and kept the civil rights movement going. And he was the bridge that would say, but let us get something done. And he would be there.
And this weekend, Sharpton said there will be a rally in remembrance and in honor of Jackson. And he said he doesn't think Jackson would have wanted an overly sanctimonious mourning, but rather the mourning that turns into action for the civil rights movement, Shannon.
Dan Rivley reporting for us today. Dan, thank you. All right, time for a look at some of your business headlines today. Netflix has granted Warner Brothers Discovery a 7-day waiver to reopen negotiations with Paramount Skydance. The waiver allows Warner Brothers to re-examine Paramount's offer to buy the studio giant. Netflix and Warner Brothers agreed to a deal late last year for the streamer to buy Warner Brothers for $72 billion. Paramount has since launched a hostile bid to buy Warner Brothers, revising its initial offer in order to purchase the company. The chairman of Hyatt Hotels is leaving the company's board over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Thomas Pritzker informed the rest of the board that he is retiring immediately. Emails between Pritzker and Epstein from 2008 were in the latest batch of files released by the Justice Department. Pritzker says he regrets his relationship with Epstein and his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell. And Apple will soon integrate video into its podcast experience. This will be coming to Apple Podcasts in the spring. With the move, Apple will join the likes of Spotify, YouTube, and Netflix, all of whom use video with their podcasts. More of your top stories coming up after the break. But first, did you see this? A new exhibit in Queens is bringing the stories and set designs from The Sopranos to life. Over the weekend, the Museum of the Moving Image in Astoria opened the new exhibit. Sketches, scripts, notes, and research materials from showrunner and series creator David Chase's personal archives are on display. There will also be 3 special screenings featuring Chase and some of the cast members next weekend. The exhibit is on display through the end of May. More information can be found at movingimage.org. All right, stay with us. News All Day. We'll be right back.
And that's a look at some of what's in the papers this morning. You done with the sports section?
Today's story is about the latest chapter for a beloved local business.
It's a beautiful day with temperatures in the 60s, but showers are expected in the next hour.
In a city that's always on the go, it's important to stop to hear the stories that connect us.
The news that matters to New Yorkers. That's what brings us together. That's Mornings on One.
Weekdays starting at 6. It's only a slice. It's only made possible by Spectrum, connecting businesses of all sizes, like small businesses, instantly serving up orders and inventory on the Spectrum Fiber broadband network, and factories, seamlessly connecting to farmers in the field with tailored solutions that always deliver. It's only a slice. It's only everything. Get your business free fiber-powered internet forever. Call to find out how.
I'm Chris Jakimick. I served in the United States Air Force and I deployed 3 times. So in 2017, I was serving as an Air Force First Sergeant. Our motto in that role is, my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jakimick, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. My service never stops.
There's nothing quite like the feeling of going to the theater. Onstage celebrates that excitement every week by taking you behind the scenes with the latest news and in-depth interviews of the hottest shows on and off Broadway. So grab a seat, because this is a show you won't want to miss. Join us every Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m. for Onstage.
Onstage is presented by your Tri-State Cadillac dealers. Discover which Cadillac is right for you and elevate your journey.
Welcome back to News All Day. Thanks so much for staying with us. I'm Shannon Ferry. It is just about 1:30, and here's a look at some of the developing stories we're tracking for you today. Mayor Mamdani unveils his first preliminary budget. The mayor says state lawmakers can either raise taxes on corporations and wealthy New Yorkers, or he says he'll be forced to pursue a hike on property taxes in the city. He called the latter option a last resort. A civil rights leader, Jesse Jackson, has died. Jackson was a protege of Martin Luther King Jr., whose long career in politics had a major impact around the country and here in the city. Jesse Jackson was 84 years old. And the Trump administration has released additional federal dollars for the Gateway Tunnel project. It comes after a judge ordered the White House to free up hundreds of millions in funding that it had frozen for the rail tunnel. All right, let's get a quick check of the forecast. Mother Nature helping to get rid of some of the snow today. Temperatures above normal, topping out in the upper 40s. We struggle to see much sunshine, but at least the remainder of today is dry. Tomorrow, expect some late morning rain. We have early afternoon clouds. Rain returns for the evening commute, and the threat of rain continues through the end of the week. I've been telling you, Mayor Mamdani unveiled his preliminary budget proposal. The mayor says the city's budget deficit is about $5 billion. He again reiterated his call on state lawmakers to raise taxes on the city's wealthiest residents and corporations. And he says if that does not happen, then he will try to raise property taxes.
And if we do not go down the first path, the city will be forced down a second, more harmful path. Faced with no other choice, the city would have to exercise the only revenue lever fully within our own control. We would have to raise property taxes. We would also be forced to raid our reserves. The options of the second path are the options of last resort.
And joining me now to discuss this is Courtney Gross. Courtney, you know, we don't know if this is political bargaining, but a lot of the reporters were asking him, you know, what if this feels like a betrayal to the many people who supported you because you said you wanted to make the city more affordable, and a 9.5% property tax, it's not nothing.
Yeah, 9.5% property taxes is huge. We haven't seen property taxes be increased, and since the Bloomberg administration, he was facing a fiscal cliff when he first took office and had to increase property taxes several times over his tenure there. Ended up reversing it a bit as well. But this is quite stunning, because here you had someone who campaigned on the promise of affordability, reducing costs for so many New Yorkers, and property taxes are seen as a regressive tax. They are spread out across the board. 9.5% affects a homeowner, a small homeowner in Queens, potentially a lot more than it would in a large luxury penthouse in Manhattan for someone who is far wealthier. So we'll have to see how this goes. It's stunning. I was sitting there watching the press conference, and my mouth was open because it just felt like it was something that the city really hasn't considered in quite some time. And coming from Mayor Mamdani, who obviously campaigned on a very specific platform, it just felt very antagonistic to that platform.
Yeah, and you have to imagine that it would trickle down eventually to the renter as well, because building owners are then just going to pass that on to the consumer. We do want to point out, you need the city council in order to do this, and Council Speaker Julie Medin said, I'll read some of the quote, at a time when New Yorkers are already grappling with an affordability crisis, dipping into rainy day reserves and proposing significant property tax increases should not be on the table. So what kind of potential fight does this set up the council and the mayor for?
Yeah, I mean, for many officials, it is a non-starter. I think we caught up with the Queensborough president, Donovan Richards, also at City Hall, and he said, you know, you're going to get people in his neighborhood, and in his borough in particular, homeowners in his neighborhood are going to lose their homes if you increase taxes like this on the backs of homeowners across New York City. This is a bluff. Mayor Mamdani obviously really wants this tax increase from Albany, the increase on millionaires and the increase on the corporate tax rate, which has to go through the state legislature and has to be approved by the governor. The governor has said no. She is up for re-election. So now he's laying his cards on the table, saying, well, if you don't want to increase taxes on millionaires, then perhaps we're going to increase taxes on property taxes on all New Yorkers. And it doesn't matter that it's Mayor Mamdani and City Hall who would be making this decision. New Yorkers are all going to the ballot box this year to vote for governor. If you increase property taxes on homeowners in Queens and Brooklyn, small property owners, they're probably going to take that anger out on someone, and it's probably going to be the incumbent. And Governor Kathy Hochul knows that. So some might say that what Mamdani is doing is brilliant politically, but I do think that it also has the opportunity to backfire, because it could potentially really sour the relationship that has been good up until this point with the governor.
No, absolutely. And I mean, he talked about how grateful he was for the governor in this budget proposal, talking about the $1.5 billion that the state kicked in to help with the deficit. But at the same token, what he's not saying is that he's really threatening to go with what he's calling this nuclear option if she does not act. It really falls on her.
He's really trying to paint this very